Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's organizing video. We are tackling the medicine cabinet this week. That tends to be a very frustrating place to find things because there's a lot of different shapes and sizes, and it almost feels like an endless search all the time. And I can tell from even some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of that it's of late been a very common problem for a lot of people. So I'm going to show you two different scenarios that each cabinet was organized. One was for under $50 and one was slightly over $100. So you can see the difference between the two and how you can create a more organized and functional medicine cabinet. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so this is the before picture of this medicine cabinet and wanted to show you what it looked like beforehand so you could get an idea of the thought process that I had when I walked through this so that you can replicate or do something extremely similar or the same. So the first thing that she actually did was send me the picture of this. So I got a rough feel for everything that was in there and could see it was just a variety of items with most of it kind of being their medicine cabinet, but kind of turned into that like extra large junk drawer that was in the cabinet. Her main frustration was just opening it up and not being able to find what she needed. So we needed to create something that was a bit more functional. So after I got the image, the next two things were extremely important pieces of information because that is what determined the bins that were going in there. So one was the dimensions. You cannot do anything without having the proper dimensions. And I actually was looking at a bin and I confirmed with her, I'm like, you are sure the depth of this is at 11 inches deep? Because I'm looking at one that is close to 12. And she said it's right at 11. And that was very important because if I had gone with the other bin, it was not going to fit and it would have just messed up the entire project. So that was the first step, the measurements. Second step was the budget. Wanted to keep it around $50 if possible. Now, knowing what bins are out there and what the price point of a lot of them were, I told her I think that this is completely doable. So those were the two pieces of information that I started with and built from there. The very first step for this project, once I got there, was emptying out this completely. Want to start with a fresh, clean slate. So as I started taking things out, started putting them in categories, grouping them out on the countertop. So it made it easier to get a visual of what was going to be going in there. Okay, so once everything was emptied out, then it was really putting things into categories. And I used these particular bins, one from the price point of it. They're $3.49 a piece. And they had also dividers in them, which is very important because it helped keep things separated and just didn't turn into a big pile or a mess when you put things in a bin, because that can easily happen. You could just have all these beautiful bins sitting in there and then you take down the bin and it's just a total disaster and you're still searching for things. So that is something that I wanted to avoid, and I knew with these particular bins that could be accomplished. Another thing that's great about them is the dividers are removable. So if we needed to make any type of adjustments or make it a little bit bigger, there was that flexibility to it. And on top of it, these also stack. So if there was more room that needed to be created, you could easily stack these. Obviously, you need to have the items being flat, or otherwise the stacking scenario isn't going to work. Band-Aids would be a great example of a bin that you could stack on top of already a Band-Aid bin because everything lays flat. So that was something to keep in mind, but this was part of the reason why I went with these particular bins that work great for medicine cabinets because of the multiple compartments and the price point, and they fit the dimensions. Okay, so this is how the project looked after everything was done and completed. And as you can see, if you take a look back at the before and the after, it's a night and day difference in terms of functionality, making it look more appealing and easier to get what you need. So as I mentioned in the last section there about going with those clear bins, Another thing to point out is that a lot of items were taken out of their packaging. Packaging is very bulky and takes up a lot of space. And taking them out of that frees it up and allows you to also get what you need with ease. You don't have to worry about it. So up at the top there, I'm going to kind of work my way down, is they have a lot of just little office supply items that they grab occasionally. So I put it in that white bin just to conceal it a little bit because they don't use it frequently. From there was some gloves. And then over on the right side, she actually had these clear bins that were already there. So I kind of incorporated them into this as I was in the process of organizing it, because actually when I took everything out, I didn't even see both of them in there. So it was kind of like a nice little surprise. From there, move down to that second shelf there where those clear bins were used. And I like the clear bins here so you can see what you need. And with the space that was there, that is why these bins from a depth standpoint measured out correctly and accordingly. And then down to the other bottom shelf is where we put another white bin just to tie it in from the top bin. So that's kind of how we get that nice aesthetically looking organized space. And because there was also a lot of mismatched items and packaging, that using a solid color bin helps conceal all of that so it doesn't feel as cluttered. And then the last thing added to that was the turntable. Love turntables in a medicine cabinet because you can get what you need quickly and easily, and they work wonderful for any type of round bottles because it maximizes space. So just kind of giving you a more up-close look at each section of the cabinet and seeing how it was broke down to give you a better idea and feel of the categories used. The last step that was used in this process with every organizing project is labeling. And labeling is so important because it really keeps things going back to the right places. And when it comes to labeling too, you got to choose your words wisely. My goal for every label that I put on something is to use only one word, only to minimize any type of confusion and keep it nice and clean. And here is the other side of the cabinet. And going to touch a little bit more on the labeling. If you're struggling coming up with categories, go on the CVS website, the Walmart website, and just take a look at their categories or search whatever item that you have and see what category it falls under. Again, you want to keep it broad because the more detailed you get with it, it's harder to keep that bin organized as you buy different items because our buying needs throughout the year change, especially with different seasons. So keep it as broad as you possibly can. Okay, so moving on to this particular medicine cabinet, which is actually ours. We have a lot of different supplements. So there's a lot of big, bulky items, and how to organize them can be extremely frustrating. So that is where the expandable shelf came into play and started from there and built it. So what's nice is that this could expand all the way across, but we did not want to do that because the turntables next to that expandable shelf are items that we use on a very consistent basis, basically daily. And if you can see, like the women's vitamin container is very large and tall, it wouldn't fit on that expandable shelf if we're going to put it in the back. And you typically want to have those bigger, bulkier containers in the back because otherwise they will cover up the front ones. So, you got to think about the size of these things. So that's why we put the turntables next to it, because it makes it much easier to get those items. Then from there, the bottom shelf is where we've got a lot of the divided turntables, which I love. It's very similar to the containers that were used in the last project with the dividers. They keep things neatly in their own compartments. And when it comes to medicine cabinet first aid items, there's a lot of small things that are just sometimes hard to find. And these types of bins make it so much easier to get what you need with ease. Now, something that I want to point out in this particular cabinet, and the same with the last one, is that you're going to see the spacing in between the containers, and it gives you that breathing room in the cabinet. The goal is not to have everything touching. You want to have a little bit of space because it doesn't make it feel or look so cluttered. So that's where the bottom divided turntables are. Then up at the top are the white bins for those large bulky items that we don't use on a consistent basis. The last thing with this project was labeling the white bins. Now, again, not everything is going to be able to be labeled, as you can see here, but those white bins, it's perfect so you don't have to take them down each and every time to see what's in there. All right, go measure your space, decide on budget, and get after it. Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on social at Organized Marie.